everybody, patrons of our Patreon. We are here once again. It's been a
Patreons of Earth.
Believe me, you are on my mind all the time. Joe's been just insanely busy, just doing some last minute stuff on his book. And then I've been editing like a maniac on the What We Do in the Shadows episode, which is coming out almost simultaneously, hopefully with this.
You've also been editing with a maniac who is really holding you back, I think. You really need to get rid of that guy.
One of the reasons I've been busy is I also ended up guesting. I'm guesting on a few podcasts that have been going on lately. And that is, I do just as much research when I'm doing those podcasts. So I guested on the Projection Booth. That episode is out. The Projection Booth is Mike White's movie podcast. He's been doing it for 10 years. He's got over 500 episodes and they're just all amazing. Some of them are like 5 hours long. So I did Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and he included in that episode is an interview with Douglas Trumbull, with the production designer, with one of the writers, even though Steven Spielberg claims to be the writer of that script. No, he had a few writers, and one of them is interviewed. And it's just unbelievable who he got. But interspersed in between all those interviews is me and El Goro, who is a host of another podcast, talking about this movie. So Joe, before he even listened to it, Joe's like, oh, I want to talk about, what did you want to talk about?
Closet cases of the nerd kind.
Yeah. And so coincidentally, Mike White, the host of the Projection Booth, had actually brought that up during the episode and actually went at length a little bit on that.
I haven't heard that part.
Yeah, that's at the very end. It's at the very end. So I dissed it a little bit. But I
said I could do a whole podcast just about that. I could talk for 2 hours about closet cases of the nerd kind. So we decided let's do that.
Well, the other thing is that, because we're putting out What We Do in the Shadows, that episode on that, and that's an entire movie that's a parody of reality television marries vampires. And also that was originally a short done by guys on a very low budget, very similar to Closet Encounters. And so, we realized that it relates to the episode that's coming out. There's also Hardware Wars. And then there's even a thing called Porcalypse Now, which was the same people who did Hardware Wars doing a little parody trailer of Apocalypse Now. So we're going to talk about all of that. Now, again, I want to just promote the Projection Booth. Everybody go look it up. I've been on 3 episodes. I was also on a Rosemary's Baby episode and on the Blues Brothers.
That's a great episode. You were the ideal guest.
Yeah, well,
I certainly
know.
Fairly obvious reasons.
And then the Blues Brothers, which, I coincidentally got asked to do 2 movies that Joe is just gaga over. He's a huge Blues Brothers. So we're definitely going to do the Blues Brothers on our own podcast, Comedy Film Funnel.
I thought you said we were going to do Blues Brothers 2000. That's what I was looking forward to. Because that's so much better than the original.
Yeah.
Remember seeing the Blues Brothers and thinking this would be so much better if it didn't have John Belushi, but it did have a little kid.
Yes. Again, shout out to Mike White because he's amazing. I don't even know how he does this stuff.
Yeah, I love the Projection Booth. I was a big fan.
How much
I was a big fan before you were even on it. I was a big fan.
And it's just how much content he gets out. The people he speaks to. I mean, he gets everybody in the business to talk to him, the directors, the actors, and I mean, Douglas Trumbull, come on. Anyway, so, all right.
And
so
consistently does discussions of movies that are longer than the movie. His episode about Star Wars 1977 is 5 hours long.
He will do the 5-hour episode. He did that. I think Empire Strikes Back is 5 hours.
Yeah.
I think Jaws was 5 hours.
Epic.
And mine is 3. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think he's
a full-time job. I mean,
he's promoting very soon. I think at the end of the month is going to be posting his 2001: A Space Odyssey episode, and I fully expect that to to a day long.
I
expect that to be a thing.
Take a day off from work for that episode.
Quit your job to listen to this podcast. That is my endorsement. The Projection Booth podcast. Quit your job to listen to it. So let's talk about closet cases of the nerd kind. And the first thing I want to talk about is that it was most people like me saw it because it was running in heavy rotation in between movies on HBO in the early 1980s, along with Hardware Wars. And many people conflate the two of them and assume that the same people were involved with making both. They were not. Hardware Wars was Ernie Facilius, an interesting person in his own right to look up, has many, many thoughts. Some controversial, is very much not a fan of his shout out that he got in The Last Jedi from Rian Johnson, was mostly bitter about it, actually.
So Ryan Johnson referenced Hardware Wars for those of you who are not those of you who are not Star Wars heads. He actually directly references this little,
because he was a big fan. Yeah,
this little thing done on a person's personal camera in 1977, 78.
Closet Cases of the Nerd Kind is very different. It's made by completely different people, unrelated to Hardware Wars entirely. Has a very similar sort of aesthetic to it, which is that it's a low budget, cheap looking version of it. When you examine it, you realize the production value is quite high. It took money to make this cheap looking short, way more money than Hardware Wars must have cost. This one looks like it's got professional animation in it. It's got some professional actors in it. It has cinematography that is quite good and professional looking. And he even recreates some of Spielberg's shots in this film in a very credible way.
I mean, I assume he saw Hardware Wars, I would think, because it does seem very heavily influenced, like the dubbing of the voices, the goofy voices.
So who did make Closet Cases of the Nerd Kind?
It is Rick Harper and Bob Rogers. Bob Rogers, he went on to quite a bit of success, mostly working in amusement park entertainment technology, you know what I mean? So like Disney.
He was a Disney Imagineer, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's sort of an Imagineer, or I don't think he got the title Imagineer, but it seems like that's practically what he was. And he did some stuff for Knott's Berry Farm. And he's also consulted with NASA. I assume he has just some incredible engineering skills. He had something to do with the Mars rover, you know? So, they gave him like a civilian award for his work with NASA.
And the main person involved, Rick Harper, there's almost no information about him at all. I can't find anything about the origin of this. It's very mysterious.
So it's in the style of a trailer. So all of these are in the style of a trailer. So they're about
one of
12
those,
to 15
like a
minutes.
really long trailer, a 12-minute trailer. Yeah. So and same as Hardware Wars.
But they're done at very, very goofy level of comedy.
Closet Cases of the First Kind. Sighting.
It's, to tell you the truth, it's not my, I like dry to the bone parody. I like parody that is very close to reality, just an inch away from reality. This is the opposite. This is almost like silent movie heavy comedy.
Well, it's Mad Magazine sort of. Yeah. It's a Mad Magazine kind of Weird Al mentality, and to that end, you have the title "Closet Cases of the Nerd Kind." It's kind of odd to hear the phrase "closet case" now because that has a different meaning. Yeah. But in that time, they just meant it to mean a crazy person.
Right.
Someone who has got to be locked in a closet because they're crazy. And then you see all the characters open up a closet door when you introduced. When you see them at the beginning.
Starring Stan Grivey as Roy Dreary. And Hennon Chambers as the famous French scientist.
I'm the famous French scientist sent over here to find the UFO.
And as they introduce themselves. That's why I want to compare it to around the same time Mad Magazine came out with their parody. Well, it was probably a pretty couple of years earlier because this is from 1980. Mad probably did theirs in 1978 or 9. But Mad Magazine's parody of this was called Claude Encounters of the Absurd Kind. Mm-hmm. That was their Close Encounters parody. And it has that same Mad Magazine mentality, especially if you remember in the Mad movie parodies, the big splash page that would introduce it would include all of the characters introducing themselves. Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm going to do this, this, and this. That Mort Drucker would illustrate all of them standing together at the beginning. And I think it was very influenced directly and indirectly by the comedy of Steve Martin. And you have a couple of guys in the movie doing bad Steve Martin impersonations.
I didn't pick that up, actually.
Oh, we must talk about that. At the time, Steve Martin was the biggest comedian on earth. It was around, the late 70s, and he was playing stadiums, and he was doing something that hadn't really been done that much in the 70s. And that's why he was such a phenomenon, which was he was silly. Mm-hmm. He was doing silly things. He was wearing a stupid arrow through his head, and he was doing doofy dancing, and he was doing this. And, this is coming out of the era of Watergate, and everybody was doing political satire, and even Saturday Night Live was doing political satire. And then Steve Martin got up there wearing bunny ears.
King Tut.
Phenomenon.
The song King Tut, doing novelty songs.
the way Weird Al Yankovic was influenced by Mad Magazine, but also influenced by the very, very silly comedy that Steve Martin was doing at the time. And so, yeah, at the beginning, the characters introduce themselves, and they have this one actor, Hennon Chambers. They introduce him as if he's somebody. And he turned out to have been probably the only person in the movie who went on to have an acting career as this French scientist. And he comes out and he's basically doing Steve Martin. He's doing Steve Martin's French guy accent, you know.
Oh, yeah, I guess so, yeah.
I'm the famous French scientist.
Yeah.
He's doing that. And then later on in the movie, there's a guy, when the alien starts playing music, there's a guy doing a full-on Steve Martin impression dance. Like, he's doing the moves directly from Steve Martin. It's very Steve Martin influenced. We're introduced to the main character, who instead of Roy Neary is Roy Dreary. In Mad Magazine, they called him Cloy, not Roy. So that was the way they changed it. In this one, we're introduced to Roy Dreary, and instead of an electrical worker, he's a sewage worker, because
funnier. It's
poop
funnier.
is funny. Because, yeah, like every single thing has to be shifted to be the funny version of that. And it's also a thing from, if you remember the Ruddles, All You Needed Is Cash, for Eric Idle, did that to the Beatles. He just basically did the Beatles, only everything was shifted a little bit to be very silly. So instead of the song I Am the Walrus, it's I Am the Waitress. And instead of an apple on the label, it's a banana, because banana's funny and apple's, normal. So it's that same kind of, I think, I'd call that a Mad Magazine mentality. And of course, with Weird Al, he just took every popular song and made it about,
rewrote the lyrics,
food, rewrote it to be about eating food. And of course, this focuses all around
wacky packages.
Pie.
We were in the that was the age of
the
packages.
Wacky package mentality. Yes.
Yeah.
I loved that stuff. And I did so many things like that when I was young.
I had stacks of wacky package stickers and cards. Yeah, I had stacks of them.
So of course, this is all about pie, because a pie in a movie, you get a pie in the face, pie.
And it's sciencey.
Right.
So PI. So they play with the PI versus PIE as a joke. Yeah. And then all the voices are dubbed in, which I find, so that's what they had done that with Hardware Wars. I feel like that is a direct reference to Hardware Wars. And I think they did it a little too heavy-handedly. They're really stupid voices. Like really, they make them.
That's what's so wonderful about it.
I knew you'd love that. And to me, it's a little bit much.
No, it's a little bit much. Yeah, it's Corey Burton, who went on to be a very, very prolific voiceover actor, provides the voices in this. And again, this is professionally made production where they hired Corey Burton to do the voices. He starts out as the narrator doing a Hans Conried sounding voice. He sounds very much like Hans Conried. And then he plays the main character, Roy Dreary, basically as Dudley Do-Right.
Oh boy, this is my big chance.
And that is funny to this day. To this day, that, oh boy, this is my big chance, telling me what it means, that I still, like, I'm in the shower and I just come out with
you have to do the best line from the movie
and make myself laugh. This means something. Yeah.
That's the line.
I still do that. I'm in the shower and I just come out with those lines, and it's funny. He also, at some point, Corey Burton, you if you are paying attention, you hear him do a Phil Silvers impersonation.
Come on, guys, we're rolling.
We're rolling. He does Phil Silvers there. I love that they dubbed in these ridiculous cartoon voices that don't match the faces at all. Yeah. They hired this actress to play the sort of the Terry Garr part, who's this very normal looking woman.
Very normal looking. And
but then they
crazy voice.
They gave her this like, oh, here's your dinner with mashed potatoes. They gave her this ridiculous voice. It's so funny.
Now we should say again, that's almost could be a reference that they were inspired by Hardware Wars, because Hardware Wars was narrated by Paul Frees.
Paul Frees, yeah,
a legend.
I think you're right.
Absolute. So we'll talk about that because we're going to talk about Hardware Wars. But
I forget they hired Paul Frees to do the voice for them.
Hardware Wars got this incredible talent, a famous legendary voice actor. And so it seems like, again, it could be a little bit of like, they were like, well, let's do the same thing. I feel like they really ripped them off a little bit, but paid tribute. There's a lot of similarities. All right, so let's talk about what goes on in this clip. Just run through some of your favorite moments. They have a kid in the bed with the toys coming to life, and I like that they show the record player with a couple of albums behind it. One of them is "Great Movie Scores Done Tacky." Yeah, and we bring that
Tacky.
up. We bring that up in the projection booth episode that, there was a Miko disco version, which I own. I own this Star Wars, but it also has the Close Encounters on it. I had an original from when I was a kid. I bought that Miko disco Star Wars, which includes the Close Encounters theme. Anyway,
I remember hearing that on the radio. That
it was on the radio.
In heavy rotation at the time.
Top 40 radio would play that stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, remember when novelty songs were a thing?
God
bless Flight of the Conchords for bringing that back. What's funny too is so they use miniatures just like they did. It's so funny because in the real Close Encounters, there are so many miniatures you have no idea. Like you don't realize it because they did such a good job and everything's at night. So like the railroad crossing scene, a lot of that is miniatures, and so they do that in this movie. They have a toy truck with a miniature set, and it's a really, again, it's actually not a bad done. It's not a bad miniature set. Like it's pretty good. If you
honestly, they replicated some of Spielberg's shots in a very credible way and in a very impressive way.
The most impressive bit is the mailboxes. So in the original movie, the mailboxes are just when the alien's above him and he's in that
they're
truck,
just shaking.
They're just shaking like crazy, and it's very strange. But in this, they start singing, and he does this puppet thing, and it's very clever the way he did it. Like it took me a minute to realize those are just hand puppets. Like that's what they are.
Done.
Gonna build a mountain. Gonna build a mountain in your living room. In your living room.
One of my favorite gags is when the inside of Roy's truck starts going crazy and this sort of Lawrence Welk music comes on the radio and suddenly there's bubbles inside his truck and he's having such a good time with popping the bubbles in the truck. And it's really just, the more I watch Close Encounters, the more I think about how Roy Neary's portrayed as this guy who's like an overgrown kid. And that's kind of the point of the movie, is that he's childlike. And that may be why the aliens chose him to follow them. But here it's really played like he's an 8-year-old child. He's like, he's distracted and he's having a wonderful time popping bubbles in his truck.
So we should say the mothership is a pie. So there's a pie theme.
It's a pie because a pie is comedy because you get a pie in the face.
Instead of the mountain shape, instead of this mountain shape being the fixation, it's a pie shape.
Right.
And it's, so it's like a mashed potato shape. Like
he's seeing pies everywhere.
He's building he takes a kid's kiddie pool and starts building a pie out of it, in his living room.
Whipped cream and a big red cherry. Yeah.
Now, when he's working on that, he looks at the TV and there's an obnoxious clown. That's the only part I don't understand.
I love that obnoxious clown.
I
love that clown. He's so sinister and obnoxious.
What's the deal with that clown?
Hi, kids. This is Sally the Clown with 10 ways to eat a pie. Woo-hoo-hoo!
What is that? Is that a reference? Is that a reference to something real?
It's just a reference to how awful children's television was at that time, I think.
So strange. I don't know. I don't like that.
I love that clown.
I normally love scary clowns.
Weirdly, he's advertising pies. It's very confusing. It's just, he's advertising the Sarah Lou Pie Company, which is a chain of pie stores.
Which does come up. Yeah.
Weirdly. And he's advertising these pies by throwing them.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're supposed to eat them or not. I don't know if you go there to get them to throw them.
That's
I don't know, but it's a really offensive, awful, obnoxious clown.
Yeah, it's the point where I'm like, I don't know. This isn't
my
thing. This isn't my thing. I mean,
it reminds me of the clown in the movie The Groove Tube a little bit. Ken Shapiro plays a kind of obnoxious clown in that too. I'm not scared of clowns. I just hate them. So that's a perfect obnoxious clown. And, and sometimes I draw clowns in my cartoons and I always draw them looking absolutely obnoxious.
Yeah. Now I have to say on the second watching, I did enjoy it more. Like I was like, oh yeah, this is really well done, but it's just not my thing,
I love so much of it. I love when the mashed potato scene is done, which is beautifully lit. It almost looks like the real scene, when they do the cut back to the family looking at him aghast at his behavior. Only there's way more kids. She's got like a gang of kids. It's almost like every sperm is sacred. She's got so many kids.
Yeah.
And they're all there. And also the wife's name is Gladys, which is such a outdated. It's a name that from the 70s because you were reading Mad Magazine, which was written by guys from the 50s.
Yeah.
So that's why know the name Gladys, which in the Mad Magazine parody, it's got all of the standard, it's got beautiful Mort Drucker art, but it's also got that sort of 1970s Mad Magazine writing, which is not great. When the toys are going crazy, and the mother said, I can't believe this. This is amazing. It's incredible. And the kid's like, what? That my toys are working by themselves? No, that they work at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's the joke. But it's also, there's one gag where the French scientist is in India, and they're saying, what are they doing here? They came here. It's hot. They're sweating. There are no bathrooms, and they can't see where the music is coming from. And the French guy says, they thought it was a rock concert.
Yeah.
And it's like the 1970s, but all the writers are like guys from the 50s. So they're like,
right.
oh,
they're like,
kids,
whoa, those kids today going to rock concerts.
Kids with their rock concerts,
Yeah.
And as if you were reading that when you were 10 years old, you internalize that mentality. So Mad made a generation of children into old men, because we were also like, yeah, these damn teenagers with their rock concerts, nuts to that. Yeah. So in the mashed potatoes, she brings him a plate of mashed potatoes, which looks shaped kind of like a custard pie. There's an integrity to the humor of this. It sticks to a theme. And, there's an internal logic going on there. She brings him he says, oh, what's for dinner, honey? And she says, mashed potatoes. It's just a plate of mashed potatoes is their dinner. That is it's so strange and silly and ridiculous. And his reaction to it is so cartoonish and weird. He looks at the mashed potatoes and then just goes, it's a message from outer space. You don't have to put the clips in here, because I'm just going to recreate the entire
that's the
short.
thing. I figured that I wouldn't.
I'm just going to recreate the entire short. It's a message from outer space, Gladys. Can't you see?
Roy, you've been acting really weird. Are you sure you're okay?
Oh, come on now. Can't you tell a message from outer space when you see one?
And he immediately takes the mashed potatoes and, as if they were a pie, smashes them into his face.
Yes.
And again, there's an internal logic. I'm happy to say they keep this going for 12 minutes.
The ending's great, where he's, instead of a organ, it's a xylophone, which is, what they had earlier in the movie with the kid. In the real movie, they have Carrie Guffey's Barry playing the xylophone. In the end, you have this guy, Drury, playing the xylophone.
Again, like a little kid.
And they did that scene. They did a really good job, the way they made it very musical, and everybody's dancing. It actually works really well. And they have this pie in the sky, and it's shooting out lights, and it's really, like you said,
there's animation that's really well done. The animation is amazing. It's beautiful. In fact, I was really impressed. When I was young, when I was a teenager, I thought I could make this. I tried to do I thought, well, if I have a Super 8 camera, we're going to make a cheap version of a popular movie. Let's make it as cheap as possible. And so I had started doing The Empire Strikes Back with little models and stupid things, and myself playing the characters in this exaggerated way. I'm sure I have that footage of me playing Luke Skywalker as Roy Dreary in this movie. Whoa, whoa. I have that. I never finished it, but I have that footage. But then, it took me a while to realize, oh no, I couldn't have made this. You need money to make this. I didn't know.
You need money. And you need a bunch of people.
Actually, it's made to look like a cheap version of the movie, but it actually, you needed production value on this thing because it looks great.
Should we move on to Hardware Wars?
No, because I still have more I need to say about this. I do want to say one of my favorite gags, again, is how the whole pie thing pays off and it ends. But then it ends with, you see the alien coming out, and the alien, it's the monkey with the symbols. It's the monkey with the symbols, who's in not only in this movie, but is in the real Close Encounters, one of Barry's toys.
Well, it's funny because I feel like that monkey, I didn't get to say this on the projection booth, but in the real movie, that's the first toy you see freaking out it's the first sign of aliens, is this one of those classic mechanical monkeys with the scary eyes and the big
symbols
mouth
and the teeth.
The symbol. And it's pretty scary, really. They were always a little scary. And in the end, you have 3 ships with faces. There's 3 ships. They're the first ones that really hover above all the scientists on that platform when they first arrive. And they look like they have faces. Now, some people say they look like clown faces. I think they look like that monkey. I think it's a really interesting reflection. I don't know if that was intentional, but they have that huge smiley.
That's interesting. I never even noticed that now.
Bug eyes. And to me, they're very sinister looking. And again, you see Steven Spielberg going, oh, they're friendly little spaceships. And it's like, I think they're horrifying. But anyway, so I just wanted to mention that I think that's, it's interesting that I was thinking about the monkey anyway, and then he of course used it in Closet Cases.
Well, that's the ending to Closet Cases. The Mad Magazine parody, Claude Encounters of the Absurd Kind, ends on a different note. Up to that point, it's all been like these like lame 70s jokes about traffic and crime, and Nixon even is in there. It's 1978. They're putting Nixon jokes in their parodies, And there's also what really dates that is there's a joke about how the wife says to Roy, we have 2.5 kids. And he says, half. And the wife says, yeah, well, I'm not really sure about Bruce. And that's a very dated joke. Remember Bruce meant gay?
No, I don't remember that.
There was like anytime you needed to signify gay in comedy, you'd say the name Bruce.
I don't remember that at all. Wow. That was over my
that was
head,
a thing.
I guess.
That was a thing. And that's why in the Incredible Hulk TV show, he's called David Banner, not Bruce Banner, because somebody in a meeting said, do you think Bruce, people will not think he's macho enough if his name is Bruce? But it ends, the Mad Magazine parody, I got to say, it ends on a brilliant note. It ends beautifully because there's, obviously they show Roy being sick of his family and saying, who needs this? Oh, who needs all the domestic squabbles and everything? And at the end of it, he gets on the alien ship and the final panel is all of the aliens having the exact same domestic squabbles that he just left on Earth.
Oh, that's great.
They're bickering and the alien husband and wife are fighting. Why can't you get a job and stuff like that? And it's all the same shit. It's beautiful. And so thumbs up to the Mad Magazine parody for ending on a perfect joke.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about Hardware Wars.
Oh, yes.
1978. So that was the original. It was quite a sensation, right? I guess. I mean, I don't remember it. I was a Star Wars nut, but I was like 9, and certainly don't, remember. Yeah, it was in film festivals. So probably if I was a college age, I would have been aware of it because I was always kind of aware of film festival kind of stuff. And he actually did pretty well with it. He made like $1 million from it ultimately because it won all kinds of awards and was just it did really well on this underground circuit, As
I mentioned, I would have seen it in heavy rotation on HBO, which I know I
never had HBO. I never had HBO. And so this was more low budget,
much more homemade. Yeah.
Much more homemade. The spaceships were a toaster and iron, the whole thing. Thus the name.
Yeah. And it has that same kind of Mad Magazine mentality. Instead of Han Solo, he's called Ham Salad. And instead of Luke Skywalker, he's called Fluke Starbucker.
Yeah. Princess Leia, of course, has the actual...
His actual cinnamon buns. They're
buns.
They're actual bread. I always liked that what they did with Chewbacca, which was they made him into a brown version of Cookie Monster. And called him the Wookiee Monster. Yeah, and they built a very credible looking... version of Cookie Monster,
the
but
puppeteer
brown.
does a good job.
It's
very authentic.
It's funny. Darth Nader, who is the bad guy who speaks in gibberish, you can't understand what he's saying, which is a joke that no one ever really made outside of that, which is that you can't understand Darth Vader.
Yeah, I
thought that joke,
was strange. Though. I always felt like I could understand him. I don't know. Yeah,
and it's all done in the cheapest, like most self-consciously cheap, low budget kind of way, and that's the joke of it, really. And I always loved it. I remember sending it to a friend of mine and him saying, "Oh, I couldn't get through it. It was so bad, I couldn't get through it." I said, "It's 11 minutes, man." The droids, of course,
really heavy. It's a really heavy-handed kind of thing. So it is like you have to.
You either like that stuff or not.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
Again, it is the same humor, not just of Mad Magazine, but also of, I think, what Eric Idle did with the Ruddles. All you need is cash. We're taking something and just making it into the dumb version of itself.
But it's so much more heavy-handed. That's the thing. So
R2D2 is an actual vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. And I mean, and C-3PO is the Tin Man, basically. Again, and especially Closet Cases, it almost feels silent movie humor-ish. Well, you see the pie in the faces. It's Keystone Cops level of comedy, which is, again, not for everybody. It's, so it is just a different level of parody.
Definitely for me. It is definitely for me.
I mean, again, I loved Mad Magazine, although, Mad Magazine was hit or miss, right? So, it could be boring. And of course, I love Wacky Packages, but I just think seeing it in film form, again, even I was never like as much a Mel Brooks fan as most people. I love Young Frankenstein, but not as much as What We Do in the Shadows. Not nearly as much. I like High Anxiety, actually, a little bit better in a way. Like that's a little more my kind of move. Just preference wise, that's what I prefer.
Well, what it has in common with Mel Brooks, I think, is that there's no joke too low for Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
Mel Brooks was never made any bones about it. He always said he wanted things to be funny. He didn't care that they were clever or witty or highbrow. He just wanted to make people laugh. And so he was indiscriminate. He would not have any bottom to how low a joke could go, or how dumb it could be, or how vulgar it could be. That didn't matter to him. There's a story where somebody was writing for him or on a project, or in the writer's room on a project, and gave him a joke that was very, very clever. And Mel Brooks said, "Wit is shit. Funny is money."
Yeah. See,
that's the Mel Brooks mentality.
See, I'm not quite as on board with that.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is
but that's
Ernie,
that's the style, and I think there's something to be said for it.
So Ernie Fosselius, again, he publicly stated that he was like, I don't know why Rian Johnson referenced me. I shouldn't be in a formal feature film Star Wars, multi-million-dollar Star Wars movie. He was actually quite insulting about it. He also insulted Mel Brooks.
He was mad about it.
He also insulted Mel Brooks, and he claims that Spaceballs ripped him off. I mean, he's actually said that too.
There's a great shot that I love of a gag of them supposedly walking around the desert, and it was filmed on a beach, and you can see people on a blanket in the background.
Yeah, you see someone picking up their blanket.
Putting down a blanket because they're really out actually on a beach. And you know what? Let me tell you something. You think that's not realistic, but in Star Wars, watch some behind the scenes footage of the Tatooine scenes, and you'll discover that they're filming in this, what is supposed to be a desert. But if you look at the behind the scene footage, if George Lucas had swung the camera this way or that way, you would have seen water, you would have seen trees.
Yeah.
He was in Tunisia. Tunisia is not all desert. Yeah. Tunisia is quite tropical, in fact. Okay, but that's not even the gag that I love, that I want to talk about. The gag I love is when they do their version of the cantina scene. That's my favorite gag in the whole thing, because it's an actual bar, I think somewhere in I forget where they were, in Northern California. I think he was in San Francisco at the time, but it's you see the exterior of this bar, that they picked a pretty good bar to use for this, because it has an exterior that looks almost kind of otherworldly. It looks like it could be a bar on Tatooine almost. Yeah, and of course in Star Wars they say, well, this place can be a little rough, be careful. And in this one it's like, oh, you better watch yourself, this place can be pretty weird. And then they go in and you hear the Luke Skywalker guy say, oh no, I can't go in here, this is just too weird for me, this is too weird. And then they cut to the interior, and it's just a typical 70s singles bar. It's just a bunch of people chatting each other up, and there's some honky tonk music playing, and it's such a great late 70s joke of like that being a typical West Coast 70s singles bar. And that's the thing that he was reacting to. Oh no, this is too weird. So that's that's still my favorite gag in the whole bit.
Too. Yeah, I like
that. Also, there's there's additional jokes, because they go in there looking for the pilot. That's the scene. They find the Han Solo character and the Cookie Monster sitting at a table. But on the soundtrack, you hear a song playing that was done just for the movie, and it's a parody of the country song I'm proud to be an Okie from Muskogee. But in Hardware Wars, he sings, I'm proud to be old Obi-Wan Kenobi. Also, thing I need to mention is that I recently learned that I know someone who is in that scene. As they go into the bar, way in the background, you can see a band playing, and one of the members of the band is a guy named Mick Stevens. And I know him because he is one of the cartoonists of the New Yorker,
nice.
Who at the time was living in California and got roped in to play, I forget what instrument he's playing, but he's in the background of that scene.
Mm-hmm. I do want to mention Paul Frees, because I think that's so interesting. He's just an interesting character. It's kind of amazing that they got him.
Enjoy mirth-filled moments with the amusing antics of Space Drones 4Q2 and Artie Deco.
He's this legendary voice actor. It's funny because in preparation for the Projection Booth Close Encounters podcast, I rewatched the original War of the Worlds. And I didn't realize it. He's in it. He sort of plays
as an actor on camera. Yeah.
As an actor on
Very
camera.
Rare.
Yeah. He's sort of doing an Orson Welles, but he's a reporter, so he's pretending he's like kind of the reporter that would be the one who was doing the radio broadcast. but he's in it, anyway, he plays a reporter with a microphone, and it's kind of a cool part. He does the narration for The Manchurian Candidate, the legendary one, World's Greatest Sinner, which the Timothy Carey movie. He's in that. He's done Rankin Bass work. He's in some of your favorite.
So much Rankin Bass.
He's in some of your favorite Burgermeister
Burger. Yeah, he also plays the villain in the movie King Kong Escapes. Because that was a co-production of Toho and Rankin Bass.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's Boris from Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Right.
He did a bunch of stuff for the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. And
wasn't he all of the Beatles on the Beatles?
He's half of them, I think.
He's like two of the Beatles on the Beatles animated series.
Yeah, two of them. He coincidentally, because we talked about Crazy Cat, the 1963 version of the cartoon of Crazy Cat, he was Ignatz Mouse. Stuff always comes full circle. Of course, famously, he is the ghost host of the Haunted Mansion ride at Disney World / Disneyland. He's
you can still hear his voice when you're on that ride.
And then he also, as an actor, in front of the camera. Again, I watched this in preparation for the Close Encounters Thing from Another World, which I've seen a bunch of times. And
That's right. He's the scientist in that, isn't he?
He's in that. Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of that movie.
Oh yeah. It's really not a great movie.
The monster is so stupid.
The monster's so stupid.
It's just a dumb monster. And then when they electrocute him, he turns into a little person in the same costume.
Shrinks. But the chick in it is really cool. There's a really super cool girl, sassy kind of Barbara Stanwyck kind of girl. But yeah, it's really also, who else is in that? The person who was on You Bet Your Life with Groucho, his sidekick.
George Fenneman?
Yeah, he's in it.
Really? Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. So anyway, it's an interesting artifact. Of course, it's what they based the thing on. Although really what they based the thing on was the short story.
Who goes there? It was and the Carpenter film is way more faithful to that book.
Right, exactly.
There's an actual bits of dialogue that are taken right out of the book. In Carpenter's film. Thing
from Another World really isn't really based on that short story. It's just ostensibly based on that short story, and it did get bad reviews actually when it came out, but it's still very significant, and
people
it influenced
seem to love it. I don't
Spielberg.
know. People say it's a classic. I never thought it was very good at all.
It influenced Spielberg quite a bit. Just one more. Paul Frees he is the voice of Zeppo and Chico in that Rankin Bass Mad Comedians, which I showed a clip of.
Yes, of course.
That I showed a clip of during
that's interesting.
Our Marx Brothers episode. So again, everything, I just had to bring all that stuff up. So so that's Hardware Wars.
I absolutely love Hardware Wars. It's not exactly your cup of tea. It is so my cup of tea.
Yeah,
it is.
I like it. I'm glad
perfect.
I'm sure if I had seen it when I was a kid and right after Star Wars, I would have adored it probably, much more. I mean, it would have been a little more of a magical quality to it because it is so different. I mean, now we've seen people do so many homemade productions too. We're much more used to that. But sure, I would have been really blown away by it, back in 78, 79, 80. But I hadn't seen it, till much later.
I was such a fan that when I was, I don't know, when it was on, when I was seeing it in heavy rotation on HBO, I couldn't wait and I watched it every time. And then I did a drawing of all of the Hardware Wars characters. I still have.
Wow. Well, if you have a scan of it, give it to me. I'll put it in. So
you don't think I brought that up for nothing, do you?
There you go. So Ernie Facilius, is that how you pronounce it? Facilius?
I think so.
He did another thing. He did Apocalypse Now. Same thing with Apocalypse Now. Porklips Now in 1980.
I only saw that once, only sort of within the last few years. Didn't really know it existed until recently, and then was very impressed with it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I think I actually sort of enjoy it more. Well, not really. I don't know. I enjoy the ending of that one. The second half of Apocalypse Now is kind of cool. Billy Gray stars in it. He was in Father Knows Best. He also is one of the stars of The Day the Earth Stood Still. Also connected to my relatively recent dealings. He was in Dusty and Sweets McGee, a movie by Floyd Muttrix, who was an extra
Muttrix.
Yes,
the great Floyd Muttrix.
He was an extra in Rosemary's Baby, but also a quite fun director who did some. I do recommend actually Dusty and Sweets McGee. American Hot Wax is really worth your time.
It's a really good movie. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to mention one more thing about Porklips Now and go off on a tangent for just a minute.
Oh, please.
Apocalypse Now, like, again, it's got sort of less jokes. It's not as rapid fire as those other two. Just like in the movie, he's on assignment to assassinate someone who's gone rogue. This person, instead of being in the wilderness of Vietnam, Cambodia,
he's in Saigon.
This guy's in LA's Chinatown, so that's where he's off in some back room in LA's Chinatown, which is just as bad, right? So so him wandering through Chinatown is actually quite funny. And when he gets there, they have the Marlon Brando impersonator. And one of the funniest little bits is they kind of do a shot where they scan over the books that this guy has scattered about, and he's completely lost his mind. He's coming up with all of these silly references as, deep wisdom, as if he's this guru reading off ancient texts, but it's really, all this sort of silly jokey stuff. But so there's a thing where they scan over the books. He has books that he has lying around him. So there's Jonathan Livingston Seagull, of course. There's The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, which I think I remember my parents having, which is like a weird sort of new agey book. Yeah,
I have it somewhere.
Rod McEwen's In Someone's Shadow. And then behind it is My Pal Snoopy, which is one of those cute little Snoopy books, which I used to collect. I had all those Snoopy
sure.
Books, yeah.
I remember those.
And then Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, of course.
These are the books everybody in the 70s had.
Games People Play. And then the last book it lands on is Joe Miller's Joke Book. Do you know what that is?
No.
I didn't know what that was. So I was like, well, those other books are so much fun. It's so much fun that he's showing them. That must be something kind of interesting. So I looked up Joe Miller's Joke Book. It turns out it's a book that was written in 1739. 1739. There was a man named Joseph Miller. He was an actor, very serious actor in London. The big scene was there was a theater called Drury Lane. That was the big. It's still there today. It's the oldest theater in London, and he would do Shakespeare and other things, but some comedy. And all the people who were in that sort of acting scene would hang out at this bar. And, he wasn't hugely famous, but he was just a name and he was known amongst all the players. And they'd hang out at this bar telling jokes. Now, there's two stories. One is that this guy never told a joke. He was dead serious. And there became a running joke that any new joke that anyone heard, they'd say, oh, Joe Miller came up with that joke. And it was a joke because he was so serious. The other story is that he actually was a jokester. And, they were paying tribute to him, or that he was really not funny. He was trying to make jokes and they weren't that funny. And so the joke was, oh, Joe Miller wrote this joke. If it was a really bad joke, they'd say Joe Miller wrote this joke.
I get it. Yeah.
And this guy, by the way, was, friends with Hogarth, who was an amazing painter and cartoonist who was actually quite a figure in comedy himself. So I tend to believe this guy probably did have a sense of humor. But in any case, one of his friends, after he died, wrote a book called Joe Miller's Joke Book. And it was kind of either a dig or a wink or something at this guy, Joe Miller, who everybody in the community knew. So it's Joe Miller's Joke Book. And back then, when you went to parties, you would prep yourself by learning a few jokes. You would actually buy joke books. This was something that people did in the 1700s. They would buy joke books, learn a couple of jokes, and go to the party armed with jokes. And so this book
in the 1700s, I do that now.
Yes. So this book really took off. People loved this book. It was just one of the most favored joke books. And editions have come out all the way up to recent times. This book is still being passed around. And it eventually became a figure of speech that if you told a really old joke, it was called a Joe Miller. And you'll actually see that reference.
Wow.
Yeah, in early film.
I never heard of this at all.
Yeah, it's you'd say that's a Joe Miller. In vaudeville, they would say that a lot. It's definitely a term that was used up till, the first half of the 20th century. He was just like this household name just because of this joke book. And so Dickens actually referenced him. James Joyce's Ulysses references Joe Miller joke, a Joe Miller joke.
And that's one of the funniest books.
Yes,
ever written.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so I looked up, I said, I got to see this book. And sure enough, the Gutenberg Project, which publishes, public domain books, has a print of it up. And
all the Police Academy films.
So I would like to read you some Joe Miller jokes. Now, these are jokes from
Sure.
17 mid 18th century.
Okay, so not as old as my jokes.
Not as old as Joe's jokes, but we now need to start referring to some of Joe's jokes as Joe Miller's. Now we know the technical way to refer to these jokes.
Jokes Joe Miller rejected. Those are mine.
So here are example of jokes, because I just love how different the sense of humor was. Okay. Okay. An Irishman. Now I got to tell you, there's a lot of Irish. There's a lot of Irishmen.
That the first thing starts with an Irishman.
There's
a
lot of Irishmen in these jokes.
Oh,
An Irishman having a looking glass in his hand, shut his eyes and placed it before his face. Another asking him, why did he do so? Upon my shawl, said Teague, it is to see how I look when I am asleep. That was a funny joke that people would tell at parties.
It's a solid joke. If you just updated the vernacular of it, solid joke. And you took out the Irish thing, it would work.
They say that some say this book contained the earliest examples of gallows humor. So here's one of those. People were literally hung all the time, by the way. So when we say gallows humor,
they mean it literally.
We're talking about like what we talk about HBO.
That was their HBO.
That was their HBO.
Yeah.
People would gather. People would gather and watch people get hung.
And if you paid a little extra money, you could see it on demand. You could actually say, I want that guy hanged now, because now is when I'm sitting down to dinner and I want to watch something.
Premium price.
Yes.
Okay. Hermann was so covetous, according to the testimony of Lucilius, that dreaming one night that he had spent some money, he hanged himself in the morning. But Dinarchi Philo quitted the design he had once taken to hang himself because he grudged the expense of the rope. Now, again, I got to tell you, I don't understand half of these jokes, but I mean, I understand that, but it's really interesting how the sentence structure and the comedic rhythm of these jokes,
Well, just like, so that's where Dave Chappelle got that bit from. What?
Okay. So this one's actually interesting, I think. An Arch, the boy was Arch. He was Arch. I want to start using that word again. An Arch boy, having taken notice of his schoolmasters often reading a chapter in Corinthians, wherein is this sentence, we shall all be changed in the twinkling of an eye, privately erased the letter C in the word changed. The next time the master read it, we shall all be hanged in a twinkling of an eye. So again, it's so obvious, but to them that was really funny.
But wait. See, but it doesn't really build to a surprise there.
I know.
You pretty much give away the joke in the middle, and then it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a lot like a third of all SNL sketches. You pretty much set up the premise at the beginning, and then it just peters out. Yeah.
Okay.
You can say that that's outdated, but like, I just posted a joke on Twitter about Dracula having someone go through all his books and remove all the lowercase letter T. So if you want to make a joke about what letters look like and things like that, I'm still doing it. I'm still doing that. It's still funny, in a way. So
it's a Joe Miller. It's officially a Joe Miller. I'm going to write that. Everybody go to Joe's Twitter.
My Twitter, that tweet is a Joe Miller joke.
And write that it's a Joe Miller. Okay, here's a joke from 1739, people. This is a joke from 1739. I'm not telling this joke. They are. An Irishman and an Englishman falling out. I don't understand.
Is that it? Is that the whole thing?
I don't understand this structure.
That joke's still happening.
An Irishman and an Englishman falling out. The Hibernian told him if he did not hold his tongue, he would break his impenetrable head and let the brains out of his empty skull! ! That's the joke.
The joke being that the Hibernian is not smart enough to understand that you can't let brains out of an empty skull. So the joke is that in his anger and fury at this Englishman, the Irishman can't even keep his facts straight. And that is a comment on Irishmen.
But I just thought, wow, that's what you call edgy humor. It's surprising that's in a mainstream book. The violence of it, breaking his head open in his brains.
The violence of it doesn't shock me at all.
Yeah, I guess you're right. They were going to hangings. I mean,
Yeah.
All right. Okay, you're going to like this one.
I've liked them all so far. Why not?
You got to picture Chico telling this joke. A gentleman on circuit narrating to Lord Northbury some extravagant feat in sporting mentioned that he had lately shot 33 hares before breakfast. 33 hares, exclaimed his lordship. Zounds, sir, then you must have been firing at a wig.
Is it spelled W-H-I-G?
No, it's not. No,
just a wig. Okay.
There are wig jokes.
I shot a lot of hares. That is like a Chico joke.
It's a total Chico joke. It's
not. I know. I shot a lot of hares in my wig.
That one actually works in every way. It's actually well paced, and it actually the whole thing.
Yeah,
works.
It's good structure. It ends on the punchline.
Now, if you ever doubted that Bedlam was a real thing, here you go.
Right.
A lunatic in Bedlam, capital B. That was the place.
I never doubted that Bedlam was a real place. I knew
but
that.
I mean,
that was a fact.
Weird. It's just weird to see it referenced. Like the actual Bedlam is being referenced. In this joke.
It's the equivalent of now saying Bellevue.
Yeah, exactly.
That guy should go to Bellevue. He should go to Bedlam. Yeah,
you could, and these people could go there. You could actually go there. Like we could actually go to Bellevue. A lunatic in Bedlam was asked how he came there. He answered, by a dispute. What dispute? The Bedlamite replied. They called them Bedlamites. They had an expression.
As soon as you get there.
The Bedlamite replied, the world said I was mad. I said the world was mad, and they outvoted me. That's a great joke. That's
solid. That's just a great joke. It's still true to this day. Yep. It is a universal truth.
Yes. There are,
I'm impressed.
You know what else is interesting is there's a lot of Susan jokes. Susan. I was really surprised to see that. I didn't realize that name
is there like a Susan character that's portrayed over and over again? Does she have certain characteristics?
I can see one of them is a country girl, so I don't know if that's like a country girl name. But
Seems
I was
like that probably is like a peasant name at the time, right?
Yeah.
It probably was considered like a peasant name.
So now the stocks were a thing. People were in stocks. You would walk down the street and see a person in an Irishman.
Okay. Of course. It's probably a good thing that these people did not encounter many other races. It's probably a good thing that they didn't have a diverse population, because these jokes would be so much worse today.
I found one Negro joke. I didn't read all of these. There's literally over 1,000 jokes here. So I didn't read them all.
I'll bet you.
There was a Negro joke. An Irishman being told that a friend of his had put his money in the stocks. Well, again, this punctuation, excuse me for reading these sentences weird, but the punctuation is crazy. An Irishman being told that a friend of his had put his money in the stocks. Well, said he, I never had a farthing in the stocks, but I have had my legs often enough in them, which was actually probably true. There's a Robespierre joke.
I like that last joke because it positions the lower caste person as sympathetic.
Yeah.
It's a joke for the masses. It
doesn't punch down. This is interesting. So you could tell that one of the big trends of 1739-ish around that time, the attachment of some ladies to their lapdogs amounts in some instances to infatuation. I have heard of a lapdog biting a piece out of a male visitor's leg. His mistress thus expressed her compassion. Poor dear little creature. I hope it will not make him sick. So they were real into lapdogs. The father of an Irish student seeing his son doing something improper. sorry, Irish people. I'm sorry. This.
Is the father? I just need to know: is the father Irish also? Because that helps.
Who knows?
It doesn't say. It doesn't specify. Yeah.
Now, just picture all of these could be Polish, right? There's Polish joke books, right?
Don't say one thing about Polish people because I'm selling T-shirts in Poland. So.
The father of an Irish student seeing his son doing something improper. How now, Sirrah, said he, did you ever see me doing so when I was a boy? The boy couldn't have seen him as a boy. His son couldn't have seen him so when I was a boy.
Doesn't understand how time works.
Cute. I thought that was cute. I thought that was cute. That is a good one, actually. All right, I think that's
these are supposed to be the Joe Miller jokes. They're supposed to be lame, right? Isn't that the sort of the point
at
of
the time,
right?
It's a little hard to say. I don't know. It's again, the sources are very confused on this, and it understandably, right? Because it's hard to say because there's so many different. I'm sure they found so many different sources of people referring to him from all the way back, but none of them were very solid. There is on Joe Miller's tombstone, which is now lost because somebody plowed over it and put up a building. Joe Miller used to have a tombstone.
The ultimate joke.
Yes, the ultimate Joe Miller joke.
The final Joe Miller joke.
Someone wrote a nice poem about him being funny. Now, again, it may be that this guy, I suspect, this is my vision of it from everything I've read, and my guess is as good as anybody else's, is that this guy was a serious actor who hung out with a lot of funny people and who probably told really stupid jokes. And so it did become sort of there clearly was some joke where when they heard a new joke, they'd say, oh, that's a Joe Miller. So there's a reason they did that. You know what I mean? And it's probably not because he was so funny. I think it's probably either sarcastic. I'm sure he was in on it. I'm sure he thought that was funny too. You know, like that's my suspicion. And so even on his tombstone, they're like, this guy was funny, but I think it's a little bit like, he was trying, he wanted to be funny. He's like the guy who at work in your office, who's always cracking puns or always cracking jokes. And he's trying, he just loves doing it, but he's never really successful at it. I don't know. That's my guess. That's my vision of Joe Miller. Who knows? It's
amazing. I've never heard of the Joe Miller jokes. And now I really am glad I did. And I really feel like maybe the future is that they will now call those the Joe Dater jokes.
Yes.
I would really like that.
Well, thanks for letting me go off on that tangent because I just stumbled upon that. I was like, you know what, I gotta run with this.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And thank you to Ernie Facilius for putting that little reference into Porklets now.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna be back soon again with the puppet. We're working on a puppet thing. So
I have to ask you, spoiler alert, does the puppet of the final alien in Close Encounters make our list?
No, because I told you that doesn't count. I told you that doesn't count. Yeah.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. I want to show you. I have his action figure. This is probably the only bit of official Close Encounters of the Third Kind merchandise that was ever produced.
Yeah. And
it was a bendy rubber extra figure of that final extraterrestrial because I love that. I love that guy so much. I love him more than I love E.T.
Well,
I love him even more than I love Ronald Reagan.
He was not a puppet. The first alien was a Bob Baker puppet. We're going to be talking about Bob Baker. So the first puppet you see in Close Encounters,
a marionette.
This does link in, is a marionette by the incredible Bob Baker. And so we're gonna talk about Bob Baker in the next when we do the puppet countdown. So that's coming. But that guy that you just had in your hand, he was an animatronic creature. So it really wasn't a puppet.
That's a puppet. That's a puppet.
He's animatronic.
I call that a puppet.
I don't know. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.